You know what? I thought if I was going to talk about short books for Shorty September, I would make this short. So I'm going to try to talk as fast as possible. So I was watching Evening Reader, and she did a video with some short book recommendations, and it really got my mind thinking about short books. So go and watch that video because she reminded me about some of my favorite short books. I won't give them away, but some of them also fall into the Spinster September Bookstagram Booktube September theme also. So that's really cool. Okay, but it did bring to mind some of my favorite short books. I have a few recommendations for you. How many? I think it's 8. Number 1, Francisco by Alison Mills Newman. I read this last year. It's been republished by New Directions. Thank goodness for New Directions doing what they do, right? I mean, they bring us novels that you can't find anywhere. And Alison Mills Newman was someone in her 20s writing this book in the 70s. She was part of the Black Arts movement. And you're dropped into the character's life that might have paralleled Alison Newman's life, but you're just dropped into her arts scene and music scene, and it happens over a pretty short period of time. This tiny little book, I think it's 128 pages. It's so atmospheric. It's so melodic in its writing. I absolutely loved it. Recommendation number 2, a few nonfiction along with these fiction recommendations. So I will talk about those at the end of my list. I couldn't not include this. It's one of my favorite books ever. My Face for the World to See by Alfred Hayes. Pato on his channel about over a year ago first introduced me to Alfred Hayes. I picked this up at a library sale on a whim. He had read In Love, his other book, which is closely related to this one. Am I just going to say atmospheric and melodic again? I feel like I am. Alfred Hayes is a screenwriter. Maybe he's a poet, but I love the prose in this. It is an older man, a younger woman. They meet each other just spontaneously on a beach or something. They're both walking away from houses where they were at parties. I adore it. This book by Rebecca West, The Return of the Soldier, blew me away. I think I read this last summer. It's in one of my videos. The way that Rebecca West packs in such a story. There's so many waves of emotions that you go through. Let me just read a little of it. World War I, in the background of Rebecca West's tender and perceptive first novel, narrated by a woman. So this takes place in 1918. This takes place not on a battlefield, but in an isolated country house. Atmosphere. And examines the relationships between 3 women and a soldier suffering from shell shock. So these women, the story opens, the women are waiting for this man who is related to them, whether it's a husband, a cousin, brother, whatever it is, waiting for him to come home, the things that happen after he comes home. I'm not really that interested in World War I time periods. This really has to do with the people and those 3 women and the man and other people in the story. It packs a punch for its tiny size. I'm including 2 books here that I haven't read yet, but I've reminded myself now that I'd really like to get to, and that is Carson McCullers. I haven't read Carson McCullers. What's the famous one? Anyway, I really do want to read this one. Someone just talked about this recently, the member at the wedding. This is very, to me, like Capture the Castle, in that it's a young person protagonist, but she's not super young, and endearing. I know that Carson McCullers really writes evokes a lot of emotion and a sense of place. So I didn't want to forget about this one. I wanted to raise it up to you in case you've meant to read it too. And then another one that I haven't gotten to yet, but I really want to read, is a Jamaica Kincaid. And this one is A Small Place. This one's particularly interesting. It says it's lyrical, sardonic, and forthright. A small place magnifies our vision of one small place with Swiftian wit and precision. This is an expansive essay, candidly appraising the 10 by 12 mile island in the British West Indies where she grew up, and makes palpable the impact of European colonization and tourism. So I really want to get to this. And then a reread that I started reading this summer but I didn't finish is Blueettes by Maggie Nelson. If you've ever wondered about Maggie Nelson, this is a really good essay-like book to turn to because it is her feelings at the time she's writing this book around relationships. I think it might even be a relationship that's ended, but it's all through the lens of the color blue. And the paragraphs are thoughts, I think, not paragraphs, are enumerated. So I have a few marked here that I've talked about, but it's so small. I got maybe a third of the way through it and then I didn't finish it. This is an excellent place to start with Maggie Nelson, very approachable, very poetic. This is by far my absolute favorite Annie Ernaux, which is happening. It's the recounting of her experience when she was in France. I think it's Paris. In 1963, Annie Ernaux, 23 and unattached, realized she's pregnant. This is the whole gist of the book. That's not a spoiler. 40 years later, she sifts through her memories and her journal entries dating from these days. Wow, it's incredible. It's incredible. So heart-rendering. The fact that she's looking back on her journal, your heart goes out for the Annie Ernaux in 1960s and all the tough decisions she had to make and the unpleasant people she had to be around while she was making those decisions. It's insanely good and it really packs a punch for its length. And then the last one is Rachel Cusk's Aftermath. I just reread this. I don't know that I actually read the whole thing. I have it on my phone. It's one of those things that I turn to when I'm on a plane and I just need something to read. I dip into Rachel Cusk's memoirs, and this is one of them, and it's one of my favorite. It is about her, at the ending of her marriage in 2009, hence the name Aftermath, but it's also the breakup of her family unit. And it's, I feel, Rachel Cusk at some of her best. I love reading her nonfiction, and I couldn't recommend this more. And again, short and sweet, but you get a lot for each page. And I'm sorry, one more. There's a bonus. I forgot. Kate Chopin's The Awakening. How could I forget this? I read this like a year and a half ago. It blew my mind. I can't wait to read it again. I could not find it on my shelf. Why I would have called this off of my shelf, I have no idea. The cover that I'm showing is actually one of my favorites because this is like a 1920s novel. It's groundbreaking in its content, in its subject matter, I should say. The reason I like this particular cover is that it shows this very prim and proper 1920s woman in New Orleans, and how the whole story is about breaking away from the expectations of females at the time and their very defined roles. It does so much in such a small amount of a book. It's one of the best books I've ever read. I highly recommend. All right, thanks for joining me here. I hope I have given you some ideas or gotten your brain turning. I'd love to share with all of us what you might be reading in September. I was really glad to be reminded of Shorty September. Like, it just gets you, the whole purpose is to just get you looking on your own bookshelves or on your list of things that you might want to read that you've forgotten about, and maybe actually experiencing them in this month, pulling them out to experience, because some of these are my favorite books that I've ever read. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to your recommendations in the comments.